The sun came up on a big day for the royal family. It was May 6, 2023. Today, King Charles II would be crowned in a special ceremony called a coronation. All over London, people were getting ready for the big event. But inside Kensington Palace, Prince William and his family had their own special jobs to do. William woke up early. He could not sleep well because he knew how important this day was. He was not just a son today. He was also the Prince of Wales and the next in line to be king after his father. William looked over at his wife Catherine, who was already up and checking her phone. "Big day," he said in a quiet voice. Catherine nodded and gave him a small smile. "The children are already excited," she told him. "George has been up since 6, making sure his outfit is perfect." Their 3 children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, each had parts to play in today's ceremony. George, who was 9 years old, had the biggest job. He would be a page of honor for his grandfather, the king. This meant he would help carry the king's robes during the ceremony. It was a big honor, and George took it very seriously. William got out of bed and walked to the window. Outside, he could see people already lining up along the streets of London. Many had camped out all night to get good spots to see the royal family. Some were dressed in red, white, and blue, the colors of the British flag. They brought signs, flags, and even pictures of King Charles. "Dad," called a young voice. William turned to see Prince Louis running into the room. At 5 years old, Louis was the youngest of William and Catherine's children. He jumped onto the bed, full of energy. "Is it time to go see Grandpa become king?" Louis asked, bouncing on the bed. Catherine laughed. "Not yet, my love. First, we need to get dressed and have breakfast." In the next room, Charlotte was sitting still while a helper did her hair. At 8 years old, she was very good at being patient. She would wear a beautiful white dress with a small crown of flowers for her head. Charlotte loved special events and was looking forward to riding in the royal carriage. "Will there be lots of people watching us?" she asked when William came in to check on her. "Yes, probably millions," William answered honestly. "People from all over the world want to see Grandpa's big day." Charlotte nodded, thinking about this. "I'll remember to wave and smile, just like Mummy taught me." William felt proud of his daughter. She was young, but already understood her royal duties. Back in their private dining room, the family sat down for breakfast. It was important to eat well before the long day ahead. The coronation ceremony alone would last about 3 hours, and there would be more events after that. "Now remember," William said to his children as they ate, "today is about Grandpa. We're there to support him. If you get tired or confused, just look at Mummy or me, and we'll help you." George nodded seriously. "I practiced holding the robe yesterday with Uncle Harry. It's heavier than I thought." "You'll do wonderfully," Catherine assured him, fixing his collar. Outside, they could hear the growing noise of crowds. People were singing songs and cheering. The excitement was building all over London. Soon, royal helpers came to tell them it was time to get into their formal clothes. As William put on his special uniform with all its medals and honors, he thought about what this day meant. Today was about his father becoming king, but it was also a chance for William to show the world his own family, the future of the royal line. He wanted to make his father proud, and he wanted his children to understand their place in history. "Ready?" Catherine asked, standing in the doorway in her elegant white outfit. She looked beautiful and calm. William took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready. Let's make this a day to remember." The time had come to leave Kensington Palace. Outside, 3 big black cars waited for the royal family. These were not normal cars. They had special glass that people could not see through from the outside. They also had flags on the front showing that royal people were inside. William held Catherine's hand as they walked out. Behind them came George, Charlotte, and Louis. Everyone was dressed in their best clothes. George wore a small red uniform that matched the adult ones. Charlotte had on a white dress with a cape and a flower crown. Louis wore a dark blue outfit that made him look like a little gentleman. "Remember to wave," William told the children. "The people have waited all night to see us." As their car pulled out of the palace gates, they saw the crowds. Thousands of people stood on both sides of the road. They waved flags and took pictures with their phones. Some people shouted, "We love you, William," and "Long live the king." Little Louis pressed his face to the window. "There are so many people," he said, his eyes wide with wonder. Charlotte showed him how to wave. "Like this," she said, moving her hand from side to side in the special royal way. Louis tried to copy her, but his wave was faster and more excited. As they drove through London, William pointed out famous places to his children. "That's Big Ben," he said. "And over there is Trafalgar Square." He wanted them to understand the history of the city they were driving through. The cars moved slowly down the Mall, the big road that leads to Buckingham Palace. The road was lined with flags. Police officers stood every few feet to keep everyone safe. It took 20 minutes to drive what would normally take 5 minutes because they went so slowly. Finally, they reached Westminster Abbey. This old church was where kings and queens had been crowned for hundreds of years. William's grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, had been crowned there 70 years earlier. Now it was his father's turn. When the car stopped, royal helpers opened the doors. The noise hit them at once. Cheers, claps, and the music from bands playing nearby. William stepped out first, then helped Catherine. Together, they helped the children out of the car. The family stood for a moment at the entrance to the Abbey. Cameras flashed all around them. This picture would be on front pages of newspapers all over the world tomorrow. Inside, the Abbey looked magical. Flowers were everywhere. The ceiling was so high it made everyone feel small. More than 2,000 people sat in rows, all dressed in their best clothes. There were kings and queens from other countries, presidents, prime ministers, and famous people from all walks of life. A helper showed William and his family to their special seats near the front. These seats gave them a good view of the altar where King Charles would be crowned. George had to go to a different area to get ready for his page duties. William bent down and fixed his son's collar one last time. "You'll be brilliant," he whispered to George. The boy nodded, looking nervous but brave. Then he went with the other pages to wait for their big moment. Catherine helped Charlotte and Louis sit down properly. "Sit still and be quiet during the ceremony," she reminded them. "It will be long, but it's very important." Louis swung his legs as he sat on the high chair. "Will Grandpa wear a big crown?" he asked. "Yes," William told him. "The same crown that Great-Grandma wore when she became queen." The music in the Abbey grew louder. Everyone stood up as important people began to enter. First came the religious leaders in their special robes. Then came representatives from all parts of Britain. The Abbey was filled with colors, music, and a feeling of history. William felt his heart beat faster. He looked at Catherine, who gave him a reassuring smile. Then he looked at his children. They were part of this long royal story now. Someday, George would sit where Charles was about to sit, and William would be the one wearing the crown. "It's starting," Catherine whispered as the choir began to sing a special song. The coronation of King Charles II was about to begin, and the Wales family was ready to play their part in this historic moment. The music in Westminster Abbey grew louder. Everyone stood as King Charles and Queen Camilla walked slowly down the long aisle. King Charles wore a red robe with white fur. He looked serious but calm. Queen Camilla walked beside him in a white dress with gold designs. William watched his father with pride. He knew how long Charles had waited for this day. For more than 70 years, Charles had been the heir, waiting while Queen Elizabeth I ruled. Now, at 74 years old, it was finally his time to be king. Little Louis pointed and whispered loudly, "There's Grandpa." Some people nearby smiled at the little prince's excitement. Catherine gently put her finger to her lips to remind him to be quiet. The ceremony began with prayers and songs. The Archbishop of Canterbury, the most important church leader in England, stood at the front. He would be the one to place the crown on Charles's head. George appeared with 3 other pages. The boys walked behind King Charles, helping to carry his long robe. George's face was serious. He knew his job was important. William felt so proud seeing his son performing his duty perfectly. Charlotte sat very still, watching everything with wide eyes. She loved the music and the colorful clothes. Sometimes she would whisper something to Louis to help him understand what was happening. The ceremony had many parts. First, King Charles promised to be a good king and to follow the laws. Then he was given special oil on his hands, chest, and head. This was a very old tradition to show that God had chosen him to be king. After that came the most important moment. The Archbishop lifted the heavy gold crown. It was called St. Edward's crown, and it was more than 350 years old. It had many jewels and was very heavy. The abbey became very quiet. Everyone watched as the crown was placed on Charles's head. At that exact moment, people outside the abbey shouted, "God save the king." Bells rang all across London. William and Catherine stood tall and proud. "Is Grandpa the king now?" Louis asked, a bit too loudly. "Yes, he is," William whispered back with a smile. After the crowning, more special things happened. King Charles was given a ball called an orb, a stick called a scepter, and a ring. Each item had special meaning about the king's power and duty. Then came another important part. All the royal family members had to bow or curtsy to the new king. William was the first to do this. He walked up to his father, looked him in the eyes for a moment, and then bowed deeply. It was both a royal duty and a son showing respect to his father. When it was Catherine's turn, she curtsied gracefully. Charlotte copied her mother perfectly, dipping down in a beautiful curtsy that made many people smile. Even little Louis managed a small bow, though he nearly lost his balance doing it. The ceremony continued with more prayers and songs. It was long and Louis began to get restless. He yawned widely, not covering his mouth. People with cameras took pictures of this. Louis's funny faces would be in newspapers the next day. Catherine took out a small book from her purse. It was a picture book about kings and queens that she had brought for Louis. This kept him busy for a while. Charlotte helped point things out to him in the book. As the ceremony went on, William noticed that George looked tired from standing so long. But the boy didn't complain. He stood straight and did his job perfectly. William made a mental note to tell George later how proud he was. Outside the abbey, the crowds continued to wait in the rain. They watched the ceremony on big screens set up in parks and streets. People cheered every time they saw William and his family on the screens. Inside, the ceremony was moving toward its end. Soon, they would leave the abbey and go to Buckingham Palace. There, they would stand on the famous balcony and wave to the people. But first, there was the long procession out of the abbey, where everyone would see the newly crowned King Charles II in all his royal glory. After 3 hours, the coronation ceremony ended. King Charles and Queen Camilla stood up from their thrones. The crown on Charles's head shined brightly under the abbey's lights. It was time to leave Westminster Abbey and show the new king to the waiting crowds. George returned to his family after finishing his page duties. He looked tired but happy. "You did so well," William told him, putting his hand on George's shoulder. "I was worried I might trip," George admitted. The robe was so heavy. The royal family lined up for the procession out of the abbey. King Charles and Queen Camilla went first. Then came William, Catherine, and their children. The music played loudly as they walked slowly down the aisle. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sun was trying to break through the clouds. People cheered loudly when they saw King Charles wearing his crown. The sound was like thunder. "It's so loud," Louis said, covering his ears. Catherine held his hand to make him feel safe. Now it was time for the carriage ride to Buckingham Palace. This was the part that Charlotte had been looking forward to most. The family would ride in a beautiful golden carriage pulled by 6 white horses. This carriage was very old and had been used for many royal events. "Remember to wave," Catherine reminded the children as they got into the carriage. "The people have waited all day to see you." The carriage began to move slowly. The crowds were even bigger now than they had been earlier. People from all over the world had come to London for this day. They took pictures and videos as the royal carriage passed by. Charlotte waved like a perfect princess. She had practiced this wave many times. George waved too, but not as much as his sister. He felt a bit shy with so many people watching him. Louis waved with both hands, sometimes so fast that it made people laugh. Inside the carriage, William pointed out interesting sights to his children. "Look at those guards on horses," he said. "They're called the household cavalry. They have protected kings and queens for hundreds of years." The children looked at the soldiers on beautiful black horses. The soldiers wore red uniforms and shiny metal helmets with feathers. The ride to Buckingham Palace took 30 minutes. By the end, Louis was getting tired again. He leaned against Catherine and asked, "Are we nearly there yet?" "Almost," she told him. "And then we have the balcony appearance. After that, you can rest." Finally, the carriage arrived at Buckingham Palace. This huge building had been the home of British kings and queens for nearly 200 years. The gates opened, and the carriage went into the courtyard where no crowds could see them. Inside the palace, the family had a short break. They went to a private room where they could sit down and have a drink and a small snack. Louis immediately sat on the floor and took off his fancy shoes. "My feet hurt," he complained. William laughed. "Mine too," he said, sitting next to his son. "These fancy shoes are not made for comfort." Catherine checked the children's clothes and fixed their hair. Soon, they would go onto the famous balcony to wave to the crowds. This would be the moment most people were waiting for, seeing the whole royal family together. George stood by a window, looking out at the huge crowd that filled the area called the Mall in front of the palace. "There must be thousands of people out there," he said, sounding a bit nervous. "More like hundreds of thousands," William said, joining him at the window. "They're all here to celebrate Grandpa becoming king." A palace helper came into the room. 5 minutes until the balcony appearance," he announced. The children quickly finished their drinks and snacks. Catherine made sure their faces were clean. William straightened his uniform. "Ready for the big finish?" he asked his family with a smile. Charlotte nodded eagerly. "I've been practicing my wave all day." Together, the Wales family walked through the grand rooms of Buckingham Palace toward the balcony doors. The most public moment of this historic day was about to begin. The time had come for the big balcony moment. A palace worker opened the tall glass doors that led to the famous Buckingham Palace balcony. King Charles and Queen Camilla stepped out first. The roar from the crowd was like a giant wave of sound. William and Catherine exchanged quick glances. This was an important moment for their family. They would stand next to the king, showing everyone the line of succession. The path from Charles to William to George. "Remember to smile," Catherine whispered to the children. "This is the picture people will remember." The Wales family stepped onto the balcony. The view was amazing. The mall, the wide road in front of the palace, was filled with people as far as they could see. Red, white, and blue flags waved everywhere. Some people had been standing there since early morning. Louis ran to the edge of the balcony and waved with both hands. The crowd loved this and cheered even louder. Catherine stood behind him, making sure he didn't lean too far. "Look at all the people," Louis shouted. "There are millions." George and Charlotte stood more calmly by their father. George, as future king after William, stood tall and tried to look grown-up. Charlotte, always proper, waved her hand in the perfect royal way. King Charles looked very happy. He waved to the crowds with his scepter in one hand. The heavy crown still sat on his head, glittering in the afternoon light. He turned to William and put his hand on his son's shoulder, a rare public show of affection. The palace had planned a special surprise. Even though the weather was not perfect, the Royal Air Force would fly planes over the palace. Everyone looked up as they heard the roar of engines. "The planes are coming." George pointed to the sky. 9 jets flew overhead in perfect formation. They left trails of red, white, and blue smoke behind them, the colors of the British flag. The crowd cheered and clapped. Louis jumped up and down with excitement, pointing at the sky. "Look, look," he shouted, his face full of joy. This moment, with Louis so excited, would be on the front page of newspapers the next day. The flypast lasted only a few minutes. When it ended, the royal family stayed on the balcony a bit longer. They needed to give photographers time to take the official pictures that would mark this historic day. William stood proudly with his family. He thought about how far they had come. His children were growing up so fast. George was already taking on royal duties. Charlotte was becoming a poised young lady. And Louis, though still little, was winning hearts with his big personality. Catherine caught William's eye and smiled. She knew what he was thinking. They had worked hard to give their children as normal a life as possible while preparing them for their royal roles. Today showed that their efforts were working well. After about 10 minutes on the balcony, it was time to go back inside. The family waved one last time to the happy crowds. Louis blew big kisses with both hands, making everyone laugh. Back inside the palace, Louis ran around in circles, full of energy despite the long day. "Did you see me waving?" he asked everyone. "Did you see the planes? They were so loud." "Yes, we all saw you," William said, laughing. "The whole world saw you." King Charles came over to his grandchildren. He had taken off the heavy crown, which now sat on a special cushion carried by a royal helper. "Thank you all for being so good today," the king said to George, Charlotte, and Louis. "You made me very proud." George, always the most serious, bowed slightly to his grandfather. "Congratulations on becoming king, Grandpa," he said in a grown-up voice. Charles smiled and patted George's head. Then he bent down and whispered something to Louis that made the little boy giggle. The public part of Coronation Day was almost over. There would be more private celebrations that evening. But for now, William and Catherine could see that their children were getting tired after the long, exciting day. "I think it's time for a rest," Catherine said, noticing Charlotte trying to hide a yawn. William nodded. The Wales family had done their duty beautifully. They had shown the world the strength and future of the British monarchy. After the balcony appearance, the Wales family went to a private room in Buckingham Palace. The children flopped onto big, soft chairs. They were tired after standing and behaving well for so many hours. "You were all amazing today," William told them, his voice full of pride. "The whole world was watching, and you made our family look wonderful." A palace worker brought in drinks and small sandwiches for everyone. Louis reached for a chocolate cookie first, getting crumbs on his smart clothes. Catherine smiled and brushed them off. "Can I take these shoes off now?" Charlotte asked, pointing to her shiny white shoes. "They look pretty, but they hurt my feet." "Yes, of course," Catherine said. All 3 children quickly took off their formal shoes. Even William loosened his tight collar with a sigh of relief. From the windows, they could still hear the happy crowds outside. People were having street parties all over London to celebrate the coronation. There was music and dancing in the parks. The whole country was having a big party for their new king. George went to stand by the window. "There are still so many people out there," he said. "Do we have to go back out again?" "No," William told him. "The official events are over now. But we do have a family dinner later with Grandpa and the rest of the family." The children had a chance to rest for a while. Louis lay on the carpet and played with some toy cars that a palace worker had brought for him. Charlotte took out her small drawing book and colored quietly. George asked if he could call his cousin Archie in America to tell him about being a page. Catherine sat down next to William on a couch. "We made it through," she said softly. And the children were wonderful. William took her hand. They were. I was especially proud of George. He took his role so seriously. And did you see Charlotte helping Louis understand what was happening during the ceremony? Catherine added. She's so good with him. While the family rested, palace workers were busy all around them. Some were putting away the special coronation items like the crown and scepter. Others were preparing for the private family dinner that would happen that evening. King Charles came to visit them in their private room. He had changed out of his heavy coronation robes into a simple dark suit. He looked more like Grandpa now than the king. "May I come in?" he asked, knocking on the door even though it was his palace. "Grandpa." Louis ran to him and gave him a big hug. Charles laughed and lifted the little boy up. "I wanted to thank you all again," Charles said to the family. "William, you and Catherine have done a wonderful job with the children. Today showed everyone that the future of our family is in good hands." George stood up straight when his grandfather spoke to him. "Was I a good page, Grandpa?" he asked. "The best," Charles assured him. "You never missed a step. You made me very proud." Charles sat down with them. For a few minutes, he told funny stories about his own mother's coronation when he was just 4 years old. The children listened with big eyes. "I was younger than Louis," Charles told them, "and I got very bored during the ceremony. At least you all stayed awake." Everyone laughed, even Louis, though he didn't fully understand the joke. Before he left, Charles gave each child a small gift box. Inside were special coronation medals made of gold. Each medal had King Charles's face on one side and the date on the other. "These are for you to keep forever," he told the children, "to remember this special day." The children thanked him politely. They knew these medals were important, even if they didn't fully understand why yet. As Charles left the room, William felt a wave of emotion. Today had been about more than just crowns and ceremony. It had been about family, about the past, present, and future all coming together. His children had shown they were ready for their royal roles, even at their young ages. Catherine squeezed his hand, seeing the look on his face. She understood exactly what he was feeling. Today, their family had truly dazzled the world. Evening came to London. The sky turned pink and orange as the sun began to set. Inside Buckingham Palace, the Wales family got ready for the last event of this special day, a family dinner with all the royal relatives. Catherine helped the children change into fresh clothes. They didn't need to be as formal as before, but they still had to look nice. Louis was happy to put on a more comfortable outfit. "No more tight collar," he said with a big smile, pulling on a soft blue sweater. Charlotte wore a pretty dress with flowers on it, and George chose a small suit that matched his father's. They looked like a perfect family picture. William looked at his phone and saw that pictures of his family were already all over the internet. People loved how the children had behaved during the coronation. Louis's funny faces on the balcony were making everyone smile. Charlotte's perfect curtsy was being called Princess Perfect by newspapers, and George was being praised for doing his page duties so well. "The world is talking about you three," William told his children. "They think you were wonderful today. Even me with my silly faces." Louis asked. "Especially you." William laughed. "People love that you're just being yourself." At 7 o'clock, they walked to the palace's state dining room. This was one of the grandest rooms in the palace, with gold decorations and paintings of kings and queens from long ago. A huge table stretched down the middle of the room. It was set with the best dishes, glasses, and silverware. King Charles and Queen Camilla were already there, greeting other family members as they arrived. There were uncles, aunts, and cousins from both sides of the family. Some royal relatives had come from other countries in Europe just for today. The children found their cousins and began to talk excitedly about the day. The grown-ups sipped drinks and shared stories about the ceremony. Everyone was more relaxed now that the public parts were over. Catherine noticed that George kept looking at the grown-up table. "What are you thinking about?" she asked him. I was just thinking that someday I'll be the one wearing the crown, he said quietly. Like Grandpa today. Catherine put her arm around him. Yes, but not for a very long time. First, your father will be king after Grandpa. And you have many years to just be a boy before you need to think about being king. George nodded, looking relieved. Dinner was served by palace workers wearing red and gold uniforms. There were many fancy dishes, but the chef had made sure to include favorites that the children would like too. Louis was happy to see chicken and potatoes on his plate. King Charles stood up to make a short speech. He thanked everyone for coming and for their support. He specially thanked William and Catherine for raising their children so well. Today, we saw the future of our family, Charles said, looking at George, Charlotte, and Louis. And it looks very bright indeed. Everyone clapped. The children beamed with pride. After dinner, there was a surprise. The palace had set up a small cinema room where the family could watch the day's events on TV. They saw the crowds, the ceremony, and themselves on the balcony. I look so small, Louis said, pointing at himself on the screen. And I look so serious, George said with a laugh. You were being very responsible, William told him. As they watched, William remembered his own childhood. He had been at his mother's wedding, and at many big royal events. He knew how strange it felt to see yourself on TV when you were just trying to be a normal child. He was doing his best to give his children a more private life than he had, but days like today were part of their royal duty. William was proud of how they had handled the pressure. The evening grew late. Louis fell asleep on Catherine's lap during the TV viewing. Charlotte's eyes were drooping too. I think it's time to go home, William whispered to Catherine. Their part in this historic day was done. They had shown the world that the future of the royal family was in good hands. It was time to leave Buckingham Palace. William carried sleeping Louis in his arms. The little boy's head rested on his father's shoulder. His mouth was slightly open, and he made tiny snoring sounds. Charlotte walked beside Catherine, holding her hand and trying not to yawn. George walked tall beside his father, still awake but with tired eyes. Thank you for today, King Charles said as he walked them to their car. The people loved seeing all of you. We're glad it went well, William replied. It was a perfect day, Father. The royal car was waiting at a side door of the palace where no crowds could see them leave. This was a private exit that the family used when they didn't want to be seen. The driver opened the doors, and William carefully put Louis in his seat without waking him. As they drove away from the palace, the streets of London were still full of people celebrating. Some were dancing to music. Others were eating at long tables set up in the streets. The coronation had turned into a giant party across the whole city. Look at all the happy people, Charlotte said, pressing her nose to the window. They're celebrating Grandpa becoming king, George explained to his sister. And they're happy because they saw us today too. The car took them back to their home at Kensington Palace. This was a different palace where William and Catherine lived with their children. It was smaller than Buckingham Palace, but still very grand. When they arrived home, their nanny was waiting to help get the children to bed. Louis didn't wake up as William carried him to his bedroom. The little prince was put straight into his bed, still in his clothes. He could have a proper bath in the morning. Charlotte was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open as Catherine helped her change into her pajamas. Did I do well today, Moni? She asked sleepily. You were perfect, Catherine told her, kissing her forehead. The best princess ever. George took longer to get ready for bed. He wanted to talk about everything he had seen. Will the newspapers talk about today? He asked William. Yes, we'll be on every front page tomorrow, William told him. Would you like to see them in the morning? George nodded. He was starting to understand his place in history. Days like today would be in history books someday. After the children were in bed, William and Catherine went to their private sitting room. They were tired too, but they wanted a quiet moment together to talk about the day. The kids were amazing, William said, sitting down heavily on the sofa. I couldn't have asked for better behavior. Even Louis with his faces and yawns. Catherine laughed. Especially Louis, William smiled. People love him because he's real. He shows that we're a normal family at heart. Catherine took out her phone and showed William some of the pictures people were sharing online. There were beautiful photos of George looking serious in his page uniform. There were sweet pictures of Charlotte helping Louis understand what was happening. And there were funny pictures of Louis yawning and making faces that were making everyone smile. We should share some of our own photos, Catherine suggested, to thank people for their support. William agreed. Catherine selected a few behind-the-scenes pictures she had taken that morning. One showed the children getting ready. Another showed them practicing their waves in the mirror. These personal touches would help people feel connected to the royal family. As they sat together, William thought about what this day meant for his family. His father was now King Charles II. Someday, William would be king. And after him, little George. Today had shown the world that the line of succession was strong. They're calling us the future of the monarchy, William said, looking at an article on his phone. That's a lot of pressure, Catherine replied. But today showed that we're ready for it. Outside, the celebrations continued into the night. But inside Kensington Palace, the Wales family slept peacefully after their big day in the spotlight. The next morning, sunshine filled the rooms of Kensington Palace. It was Sunday, the day after the coronation. William woke up early and checked his phone. The pictures of his family were on every news website in the world. "The Wales children steal the show," said one headline. "Prince Louis's funny faces charm the world," said another. "Future King George performs duties perfectly," read a third. William smiled as he scrolled through the stories. The pictures showed his family at their best. George looking responsible, Charlotte being helpful, and Louis being his natural funny self. The perfect mix of royal duty and normal family life. Catherine joined him with a cup of tea. "Have you seen the pictures?" she asked. "Yes, they love us," William said. "Especially the children. And the photos we shared last night have millions of likes already," Catherine added. She had posted several behind-the-scenes family pictures on the official royal social media accounts. People loved these glimpses into their private lives. Louis was the first child to wake up. He came running into their room, full of energy as if yesterday had never happened. "Is it still the coronation?" he asked, jumping onto their bed. "No, that's all finished," William told him. "Grandpa is officially the king now." "Can I see the pictures of me?" Louis asked. He had heard the grown-ups talking about his funny faces. William showed him some of the newspaper pictures on his phone. Louis laughed when he saw himself yawning during the ceremony and making faces on the balcony. Soon George and Charlotte woke up too. The family had breakfast together in their kitchen. It was a simple meal of cereal and toast, very different from the fancy dinner at Buckingham Palace the night before. "Look at these," William said, showing the children the morning newspapers. Every front page had pictures of the royal family at the coronation. George studied the pictures carefully. "We did good, right, Dad?" he asked. "You did brilliantly," William assured him. "Everyone is saying how well-behaved and professional you all were." After breakfast, the children went to play in the garden. It was good for them to have normal time after such a big public event. Catherine watched them from the window as they ran around with their dog. "They need this," she said to William. "Time to just be children." William's phone rang. It was King Charles calling from Buckingham Palace. "Good morning, son," Charles said when William answered. "Have you seen the papers?" "Yes, they're very positive," William replied. Everyone loved seeing the children. The Prime Minister called to say the coronation was a great success. Charles told him. "He specifically mentioned how well your three performed. You and Catherine are doing a wonderful job with them." William felt proud hearing these words from his father. "Thank you. That means a lot." Later that morning, the family decided to go for a private walk in Kensington Gardens. They wore normal clothes, jeans, and sweaters, not the fancy outfits from yesterday. Catherine brought bread to feed the ducks at the pond. As they walked, a few people recognized them and waved. The family waved back, but kept walking. Today was about being together, not about being royal. "Did you like being in the coronation?" William asked Charlotte as they threw bread to the ducks. "Yes," she said thoughtfully. "But I like this too, just being us." William put his arm around her small shoulders. This was the balance they always tried to find, doing their royal duties well, but also having a normal family life. As the day went on, the memories of the coronation were still fresh, but life was returning to normal. There would be school for the children tomorrow. William and Catherine had royal duties to attend to, and King Charles would begin his work as the new monarch. But the images of that special day would remain in history forever. The day when Prince William's family truly dazzled the world at the coronation, showing that the future of the British monarchy was in safe hands for generations to come.